It's very delicious to act with beautiful men. Some of them are in the realm of fantasy. Al Pacino.
Angie Dickinson's story does not begin with fame, glamour, or red carpets. It begins quietly, far away from Hollywood, in North Dakota, where she was born into an ordinary family with ordinary expectations. No one around her imagined movie cameras or flashing lights in her future. As a young girl, Angie was shy but thoughtful. She loved words, poetry, and ideas. She wrote in notebooks, not because she wanted attention, but because she felt deeply and needed a way to express herself. She did not come from money, and she did not have powerful connections. What she had was determination and a calm confidence that made people notice her without her ever trying. When she later entered Hollywood in the 1950s, that quiet confidence became both her strength and her danger. At that time, Hollywood was a place where women were expected to smile, obey, and never question the men in power. Angie did not fight loudly, but she also did not disappear into the background. She stood still when the industry wanted her to bend, and that made her different. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was her presence that made people stop and look. She did not play games, and she did not beg for roles. She simply existed as herself, and in that era, that alone made her unusual. As her career slowly grew, people began to see her as a symbol of elegance and strength. But behind the scenes, Angie was learning a hard truth. In Hollywood, talent could open doors, but power decided how long those doors stayed open. When she met Burt Bacharach, it felt like her life was entering a new chapter. He was already famous, already respected, and already admired by the world. To the public, they looked perfect together. A beautiful actress and a brilliant composer. Newspapers and magazines called them a dream couple, a true Hollywood fairy tale. Angie wanted to believe that image. At first, the relationship felt exciting and meaningful. Burt's world was full of music, creativity, and praise, and Angie felt proud to stand beside him. But slowly, small cracks began to appear. Burt was often distant, more focused on his work than on their marriage. Late nights, long trips, and emotional distance became normal. Angie told herself that this was the price of loving a genius. She tried to be patient. She tried to be understanding. But the warmth faded quickly. When their daughter Nikki was born, Angie's life changed completely. Nikki was born with serious developmental challenges, and from the very beginning, Angie knew her daughter would need special care, patience, and protection. Angie stepped fully into the role of a mother. She learned medical terms, treatments, and therapies. She spent nights in hospitals and days speaking to doctors. She made a choice many people never saw. She stepped back from Hollywood, turned down roles, and stopped chasing fame because her daughter mattered more than applause. Burt, however, struggled to accept this new reality. According to Angie's later accounts, he began to withdraw even more. Instead of standing beside her, he disappeared into his work, his tours, and his public success. Angie felt alone in her marriage. One night, during a serious medical emergency involving Nikki, Angie called Burt, crying and desperate. She needed support. She needed comfort. But the response she received felt cold and distant, as if Nikki's suffering was an inconvenience rather than a shared responsibility. That moment stayed with Angie forever. It was the moment she realized she was truly alone. From that point on, Angie became Nikki's full-time fighter. She became strong because she had no other choice. Years later, Angie discovered that Burt had been unfaithful during her pregnancy. Even then, she chose silence. At that time, women were expected to protect their husbands' images, no matter the cost. Speaking out could destroy a career. Angie carried the pain quietly, focusing on her daughter and pushing her own heartbreak aside. When their marriage finally ended in 1981, the press described the divorce as friendly and calm. But behind that simple word was a story of emotional abandonment and quiet suffering. Decades later, when Nikki passed away, Angie stood alone once again. Bert did not attend the funeral. There were no flowers, no call, and no public acknowledgement. Angie delivered her daughter's eulogy herself, standing before strangers, proving once more that she had always been the only one truly present. This chapter of her life left scars that never fully healed, but it also showed her strength. She survived not because she was protected, but because she refused to break. After the collapse of her marriage, Angie Dickinson believed that the worst was behind her. She hoped that life would finally give her space to breathe, to heal, and to rebuild her career on her own terms. But Hollywood had other plans. The next battle she faced did not come from love or family. It came from power. In the film industry, there were men who did not appear on magazine covers, but controlled everything behind the scenes. These men decided who worked, who disappeared, and who was forgotten. Angie later suggested that when she refused one such powerful figure, the punishment was immediate and silent. No shouting, no threats, just absence. Phone calls stopped. Roles vanished. Meetings were canceled without explanation. One decision from one man was enough to push her toward the edge of invisibility. Angie learned a painful lesson. In Hollywood, rejection did not always come with anger. Sometimes it came with silence. And silence could destroy a career faster than any public scandal. Despite this, Angie continued to move forward. Then she met Frank Sinatra. To the outside world, their relationship looked like magic. Frank was one of the most powerful and admired men in entertainment. Being by his side meant glamour, protection, and influence. At first, Frank treated Angie like a queen. There were flowers, romantic dinners, and grand gestures that felt like scenes from a movie. Angie wanted to believe she had found love that did not require sacrifice. She believed she could be with a powerful man and still remain herself. But slowly, the truth revealed itself. According to Angie's later reflections, Frank did not need to raise his voice or show anger. His control was quiet and precise. When Angie accepted roles he did not approve of, opportunities mysteriously disappeared. Scripts that once seemed certain were suddenly gone. Meetings were canceled. Promises were broken without explanation. Hollywood did not ask questions. Everyone understood where the silence came from. Angie began to feel trapped. She measured her words carefully. She thought twice before accepting work. Every step toward independence carried a risk. The world saw a perfect couple, but behind closed doors, Angie lived with constant fear of losing everything she had worked for. She was not beaten or shouted at, but pieces of her life were taken away one by one. Her voice, her choices, and her freedom slowly faded. One night became the turning point. Angie had just been cast in what many believed would be the most important role of her career. Critics were already whispering about awards and recognition. It felt like a moment of victory. But according to Angie, one phone call changed everything. Frank used his influence to make sure the role disappeared overnight. By morning, it was gone. There was no explanation, no apology, and no chance to fight back. That was the moment Angie finally understood that the relationship was never about love. It was about control. She stayed longer than she should have, not because she was weak, but because hope is a powerful thing. She hoped the man she first met would return. He never did. Even after their relationship ended, the shadow of his power followed her. Jobs became harder to secure. Opportunities grew fewer. Angie slowly stepped away from the spotlight, not because she lacked talent, but because the industry had made it clear that independence came with consequences. For many years, Angie said nothing. She did not write books. She did not give explosive interviews. She chose dignity and silence. Because speaking out would have brought more pain than relief. She focused on survival, reflection, and quiet strength. Hollywood moved on, celebrating legends and ignoring the women who paid the price for standing beside them. Angie carried her truth privately, waiting for a time when fear no longer controlled her voice. Now, in the later years of her life, Angie Dickinson stands in a very different place. Time has changed her relationship with fear, silence, and power. At 93, she has nothing left to lose. Her career has already been written. Her battles have already been fought. The industry that once demanded her obedience no longer controls her future. And so, she speaks, not with anger, but with honesty. Angie does not present her story as revenge. She does not ask for sympathy. She simply tells the truth as she lived it. Her story is not glamorous. It is not comfortable. It is the story of a woman who loved deeply, trusted fully, and paid a heavy price for both. She speaks for herself, but also for many women of her generation who were taught that silence was survival. In her story, there are no perfect heroes and no simple villains. Only people shaped by power, fear, and expectations. Angie's life shows how easily love can turn into control when power is uneven. It shows how fame can protect some while destroying others. It also shows how strength does not always look loud or dramatic. Sometimes, strength is quiet endurance. Sometimes, it is choosing to survive when the world expects you to disappear. Angie Dickinson did not become a legend because she conquered Hollywood. She became a legend because she survived it, without losing her sense of self. Her story reminds us that behind every perfect image is a human being with wounds we never see. It reminds us that silence often hides the deepest pain. And it reminds us that telling the truth, even late in life, still matters. This is not a confession. It is not a scandal. It is a reckoning, a final moment of honesty from a woman who spent a lifetime being watched, judged, and controlled. Angie Dickinson's voice, once quiet, now stands as proof that survival itself can be a form of victory. Angie Dickinson, a name that once sparkled in the golden world of Hollywood, lived a life that seemed perfect from the outside. Everyone knew her as a captivating actress with grace, charm, and beauty that commanded attention without effort. On screen, she was magnetic, her presence filling the frame with power, elegance, and an aura that made audiences fall in love instantly. She could make viewers laugh, cry, or hold their breath with tension, all with a subtle look or a change in expression. Yet behind the cameras, away from the glamour of red carpets, movie sets, and flashing lights, her life was quietly marked by pain, betrayal, and the kind of silent suffering that most people never see. From the very start of her career, Angie learned that Hollywood was not just a world of fame and creativity. It was a system of power, politics, and subtle manipulation that could lift someone to the top or erase them completely without warning. She was a woman who worked hard, took risks, and gave everything to her craft. But even that was never enough to guarantee safety or respect. In her early years, she faced the same rules all young actresses faced. Smile for the right people, stay polite, do not speak out, and always be careful whom you trust. Hollywood could be cruel, and it rewarded charm over talent in many ways. Angie quickly realized that being talented and hardworking didn't protect her from the men in positions of power who could destroy careers with a simple decision. Among those men, some used their influence openly, while others, far more dangerous, wielded it in silence, erasing people without anyone noticing until it was too late. This is where her story intersects with one of the most famous and influential men in her life, Frank Sinatra. Sinatra, known for his voice, charm, and influence over Hollywood, was more than just a star. He had the power to control opportunities, appearances, and even careers. While the world swooned over his performances, behind closed doors, he could be merciless. Angie's encounters with him left an impact she could never forget, not through violence, but through the quiet exercise of authority that reminded her that in Hollywood, power often spoke louder than words. She did not speak out at the time, because the culture of Hollywood taught women that silence was safer than confrontation. For decades, she carried this lesson like a weight, showing the world a composed, graceful version of herself while enduring experiences that could have broken a lesser person. This lesson became painfully clear again with another man, Jack Webb, a man who appeared to be just a pioneer in television, a creator and director with a reputation for professionalism and discipline. But behind the scenes, his influence could be cruel and personal. For Angie, Jack Webb was not a mentor or collaborator. He was a person whose decisions, guided by his own desires and sense of control, erased opportunities and altered the course of her life. From casting meetings to auditions, she discovered that one simple choice, declining a personal advance, remaining professional, could cost her everything. Within hours, projects she had prepared for were gone. Calls were unanswered and emails ignored. It was a quiet, deliberate punishment that left her shocked and powerless. She wasn't rejected because of talent, work ethic, or skill. She was rejected because she had crossed a man who believed his influence gave him ownership over women's careers. The lesson Angie learned in those moments was brutal. Talent alone could not protect a woman in Hollywood, and survival often required silence. Yet, her story was not just about career loss.